The environmental injustice I chose to discuss is the ongoing issues with buffalo. Before the 1800s, there was an estimated 30 to 60 million bison population. Many indigenous individuals rely on bison for cultural ideologies and traditions. But with low population numbers and a lack of government enforcement, it has created injustices towards these groups. So with stronger and reformed government regulations, bison can restore in numbers. So what exactly is the issue? It begins with the mass hunting of buffalo in the 1800s, along with the quarantining of bison with no release, and altogether just a lack of enforcement and regulations for bison hunting. A quote from the journal Property Right says, "One of the biggest issues faced with bison was the multi-million massacre of bison as American settlers expanded across the United States." Bison were hunted to the extreme by settlers for their meat, for their bones, for their pelts, and eventually just hunted as target practice for game. This resulted in the population dropping to less than 800 total bison. Entrepreneurs discovered the bison can be utilized as private property for a profit, so they stopped hunting them as much. The population began to rise again. Today, there are approximately 2,000 to 5,000 free-roaming bison in the U.S. Another big issue is the quarantining of buffalo. There's a disease within the buffalo community called brucellosis. Many cattle farmers worried that the bison were spreading the disease to their livestock, so bison thought to be infected were placed within quarantine facilities. This includes 2 fences 10 feet apart to prevent any contact with any other animals. Bison with brucellosis were either euthanized or put through a study. The bison that were quarantined and went through brucellosis eradication were able to be brucellosis-free after 3 years. But these buffalo are never returned to the wild, which does not help with the population reproduction. It was also found out during these studies that the transmission of brucellosis from bison to cattle was not statistically different from transmission rated from infected cattle to bison, meaning the cattle were infecting the bison just as much. You would think that with all of the hunting and low-numbered populations, there would be regulations put in place to help buffalo. There is. They just aren't enforced or can easily get around. After the slaughter of buffalo, numerous bills to protect bison were introduced by the U.S. government between 1871 and 1876, but none were passed. Between 1864 and 1872, states like Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming implemented statutes to reduce the killing of game, such as bison, but these laws had very limited enforcement, so the hunting of bison continued. In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant established Yellowstone National Park during his presidency. This is important because in 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed the act to protect the birds and animals in Yellowstone National Park and punish crimes in said park. This criminalized hunting for bison in Yellowstone, but that does not stop hunters today. What they do to get around this regulation is to herd the bison out of Yellowstone and into Montana, where it is still legal to hunt them. With stronger enforcement and regulations, hunting bison freely or this easily would not be an option for hunters. So this raises the question, what benefits do bison provide? Besides the fact they are a part of the food chain and enhance the land ecology, so cutting them out would create a hole in the food chain, the main benefit is that buffalo are a resource to indigenous tribes. The natives have used buffalo as a resource since their formation. They see buffalo as a spiritual creature and only hunt them when necessary. And when they do, they utilize every part of the buffalo. They use all of the meat for survival. They use the hide for making shelter, the pelt for clothing, and use the bones for jewelry. None of the buffalo goes to waste, and the native people only hunt them when it is necessary. Wiping out the buffalo population with the lack of regulations, it is creating an injustice towards a group that is often already mistreated. Killing of buffalo is seen as a way of controlling the natives. After the mass bison slaughter, treaties were created by settlers. This includes the Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867 and the Treaty of Fort Laramie of 1868. Basically, these treaties made it so bison-dependent tribes were moved onto reserves. The treaties required natives to stop challenging the legalities when it came to white settlement and development. It also stipulated that anyone who was not a part of the tribe should not enter the reservation. The natives held up on their side of the bargain, but the settlers did not. They would break the treaty and enter and hunt on the reserved lands the already small population of bison, and they were almost never prosecuted. These treaties created strains, conflict division, and overall injustice between the federal government and the indigenous tribes. So what are the solutions to this problem? For starters, reforming government regulations so that bison would be considered endangered and no longer hunted by hunters, but making accommodations for tribes that rely on bison for survival and use them in a traditional manner. as well as reevaluating quarantine measures for brucellosis in bison and releasing them back into the wild. And finally, donating and volunteering at nonprofits like the Buffalo Field Campaign that work with Native tribes to attend, protest, and document unfair hazing and hunting of buffalo to push for more regulations to help buffalo populations. To conclude this presentation, overall, bison are a keystone species in the United States and throughout time have been hunted to near extinction. Without bison, holes within the food chain and the overall ecosystem would be created. On top of the overall injustices Native Americans who utilize bison in a healthy and replenishing manner are faced with. With the help of the government and stronger regulations, the bison population can improve, creating more resources for natives that already have a small set of resources that they are granted with. Bison continue to be hunted and quarantined to a point of low numbers in today's society, and not much is being done to help. By voicing these issues, both the state and federal lawmakers can create stronger regulations and stronger enforcements to help conserve this species in need. Thank you for watching and learning more about the injustices faced with bison and Native tribes.